lately there have been a lot of headlines out on TV, just in the media period, regarding nanny cams, which, if you don't know, those are the cameras that parents who are having their children babysat set up in their house so that they can watch the footage and make sure everything's okay. Well, there's just, I've always felt this way, I guess, as a mother. I know what I would and would not risk with my children, and I know that in this situation, I completely am just kind of really disgusted because basically it boils down to money, saving money. These parents with these nanny cams would rather risk their child having to suffer in some way or be harmed or anything which could impact them for life. It could be irreversible, whatever potential harm could happen to this child. And these parents would rather find a cheap babysitter, which, let's face it, babysitters are cheaper. You can find a cheaper babysitter than you can a daycare, unless the daycare is like uh, some sort of state affiliated daycare that is for people who can't afford it. But you know what I'm saying? Babysitters are typically cheaper than most daycare centers. And so these parents, I can understand if the child is like over 12 and can fully express his or her feelings and relay bad things that happened, or they're just old enough to be able to try to leave the situation if something bad happened. And even then, I still wouldn't really want to risk that happening to my child, but at least they'd be old enough to possibly intervene and prevent it or stop it. But younger than that, these parents who would rather, and a lot of times it's usually parents who could easily afford a daycare, but they just want to save money. So these parents, because I've never seen, okay, let me get to the point, and then these parents would rather save money, so they find a cheap babysitter, well, relatively cheap, and then what do? They buy all these cameras and they set up nanny cams in their home so they can pretty much spy on the babysitter and just keep footage up of what's going on in their home with their children. Obviously, they can't watch it 24 hours. That's impossible, but these parents usually go back to it. Most of the time, they don't really just watch it at all. They only do if they feel like they have a reason to. But anyway, um, and it's usually only, the crazy thing is too, is usually the parents with these nanny cams in their homes are the ones with money. You don't really see the poor parents doing this crazy. It's usually the parents who have money and could easily afford to send their kid to a daycare, but instead it's almost like they get some sort of sick thrill out of testing the babysitter to see if the babysitter is gonna sit on the couch while the baby's crawling on the floor or something. It's almost like and this so reminds me of the same concept of people who, just to save money, even though they could afford to live in a safe neighborhood, to save money, they would rather move somewhere that's noted for having crime and shack up with a bunch of guns. They'd rather do that when they could just pay to live somewhere where there's a slim to none chance, based on documented crimes in the area, to live somewhere nicer. They would rather pay less money but shack up with a bunch of guns. Now, the reason that the babysitting situation with the nanny cams and shacking up with a bunch of guns is beyond ridiculous is because with both of those things, you're not being preventative. You're almost welcoming trouble. It's like you could do something, if you didn't care so much about money, to prevent that from even happening. Who in their right mind? I am a struggling middle class person. You could even say low class, but I don't like the way that sounds. But Yeah, I mean, I'm in between that, and I would still rather us be completely broke paying for the kids to go to a daycare center that's always inspected, always has cameras up, uh, glass windows everywhere, which they do have. I mean, really good ones. I would rather pay a little more to send my child there where I know that it would be like a slim to none chance of something happening to my child, as opposed to paying less money but setting up cameras and sitting around waiting for the chance that my kid it could somehow be harmed. If I had any thought in my mind that my child could be harmed at all, even the slightest, there's no way in hell I would allow my child to spend time with that babysitter. If in any way, if I at all, if the thought crossed my mind, if this wasn't a really close friend of mine or relative, and the thought crossed my mind at all that I needed to probably set up a cam just in case, there's no way I would take that chance, because like I said earlier, the impact that any form of abuse or neglect can have on a child can a lot of times be irreversible. And I just don't understand these parents who would rather save money and set up cameras and sit around and wait for something to happen. I feel like that is sick. And yes, of course, where the abuser is wrong, and when nannies do get caught abusing, I feel like the parents are just as wrong for putting their child in a situation that didn't have to happen. And the same goes for people who load up on guns. I'm not against owning a gun. Before anybody wants to be all defensive and talk about how you own guns and you do it for protection, that's great. But I'm talking about if you have the means to move somewhere where it's known that there's hardly any crime ever, and I have lived in a place like that, and it still is just like that. Sorry, but a lot of times people who really have never lived anywhere where it's crime free, they don't think a place crime free exists, but they do. Crime free places do exist. Granted, you have to pay usually a buttload to live there, but it's worth it if you care about the quality of life and safety, especially if you have kids or a home. Then you're gonna want to pay a little more to live in a safe area. When you move somewhere and save money and decide to save money, if you're going to value money over a safe neighborhood, and so therefore you're going to get a cheaper home because it's in a more crime ridden neighborhood, and you're going to load up on guns, you're pretty much sitting back and waiting for uh drama's not even the right, you're waiting for well, you're waiting for crime. You're waiting for crime. And we all know that unless a person walks around their house holding their gun 24/7, or unless their gun is on their hip 24/7 while they're in their home, then there's always a 50-50 chance that all their guns will pretty much be pointless if they're caught off guard, which most intruders are not dumbasses. They don't just walk in and without any prior examination. They usually are pretty sneaky about it, unless they're just on meth and just run into your house in midday. But the average, and it's even been proven in statistics and everything, that the average burglary, the person who burglarized the home or already knew when to come in and catch the people. Anyway, I'm totally off topic. But my point is I don't understand these types of situations. If there is a solution, or well, there's never a 100% solution in situations like this. But if there is a way to almost 100% prevent something absolutely horrible, like your children being abused, from happening, or a crime, you being approached with a crime, if you can really slim these chances down from happening, but you don't, and instead you decide to kind of invite the bad things to happen, it's almost like it's a game. It's like a game. It's a game, because in the end you're valuing I don't even know how to put it. It's so baffling. It's like you're valuing your ability to fight as opposed to your ability to step away. You could completely step away from uh, that bad neighborhood and move somewhere that has hardly any crime ever. Or you can step away from risking the chance of a babysitter doing something to your kids. But surveillance cameras and guns are not going to do anything beneficial when it comes down to what's already been done. They're not. That probably all came out crazy, but I'm just, and the gun thing doesn't even bother me as is to me, it is outright stupidity. It's just a bunch of people who deep down, and they'd never admit this, but deep down, it's like this sense of pride, like, well, it's almost like they want to have a reason to blow someone's head off, or it excites them. It's an immature excitement. They'd never admit it. They would never admit it, and I really don't care, but that doesn't even bother me as much as the nannies who, the parents who basically use their child as a guinea pig with this unknown babysitter. Sorry, I would rather, there have been many times when our household needed extra income and I needed to have a job. So I was doing gigs, random gigs, and I was babysitting, and I was doing what I could without having to leave my children because I knew that I wouldn't be able to afford a daycare. So I watched them myself because I'm not gonna risk. I'm not gonna risk putting them in harm's way for money. I'm not doing it. Any struggling that we're going through right now with money because I'm not working out of the house is worth it in the end if it means that my children are not going to possibly be abused. So, to any of you out there who approve of nanny cams and who actually feel like they're justified and as though there's nothing wrong with sitting back and in the back of your mind actually thinking your child could be abused, if you think that all that is okay, then we're completely different when it comes to that. And like I said, the gun thing doesn't bother me as much, but it's just, that's another thing too that I've only really seen people with money do. Like it's like people with money, they have some, it's like and I should say in the South. It's not like that everywhere else. In the South, a lot of times when people are wealthy or rich, whatever you want to call it, they they choose to live somewhere where it's almost like they're asking for action. They're asking for action to happen in their life. And it's like they want to get ready for the game. So they get a bunch of guns and they have them ready because you know why? They're not scared. They're not afraid to blow someone's head off. Well, real uh real men and real women completely avoid situations like that. So, but that's my opinion, and that's my opinion, and you don't have to like it or agree with it, but it's something that really, really bothered me. I just had to get it out, so.